welcome, and we are going to set up the Darkflame Live Universe server emulator on Windows natively. Make sure you have the text guide open. The link to that is in the description. And make sure you are following along with the text guide and prioritizing whatever is in the text guide over what I show in this video. The server is still being constantly maintained, and as such, the setup process will change over time. I will keep the text guide up to date with whatever the changes are. However, I will not update this video. If by chance the text guide and the video becomes so separated and out of date, I will take down the video and leave the text guide up. So just keep that in mind. If there's a difference between the video and the text guide, follow what's in the text guide over the video. All right, also, you'll need to make sure you have found and downloaded a unpacked LEGO Universe client. I cannot tell you where to get that. However, if you do some Googling, you should be able to find a LEGO Universe unpacked client. However, I do stress that you make sure the hash of that client you downloaded matches the hashes, or one of the hashes listed in the Darkflame repo README. A link to that README and repo is in the text guide. Make sure the hash matches for your respective packed or unpacked client. And how to check the hash is also mentioned in this guide. You can use a packed client, however, you'll need to unpack it. This video and text guide will not cover that. The README and the Darkflame Universe repo does cover that, but be warned, it is a process. All right, so with that out of the way, let's start with the software you need to get set up first. So go to the README or the setup guide. You'll see a list of software that needs to be downloaded. So we'll just start from the top and work our way down. First, you need ZZip and select the latest version for that. We'll need this to unzip the RAR file of your client. So just go through and install it. Once that's done, we can move on to the next one, which is Visual Studio C++. This will allow us to compile the server source code. So we'll get set up with that. And this one will take a while, depending on your internet speed and your hard drive read-write speed. So I'm going to let this sit, and we can come back to this after it is done. Alrighty, Visual Studio has finished downloading, so now we can move on to the next, which is CMake. CMake is also required for the compilation of the server source, so make sure we scroll down and find the Windows installer and download that. So that's downloaded, can get that started. And make sure you make it so that it installs to the system path, otherwise you will have issues. Also make sure that you are installing this to the C drive. Make sure you're installing all the programs to the C drive. Right. Now we can move on to Git. This will allow us to pull the server code from the repository. So make sure we select the 64-bit for Windows setup. And we can just go through and keep all the default options. Alrighty, next we can move on to MariaDB. This will allow for the setup of the server database. So everything that keeps track of character data and stuff like that. So we want to go down and select the Windows option. Your version, depending on when you're doing this, will be different, but yeah, just make sure it's on the latest version. And we want to download. Wait a couple seconds and it should start downloading. Keep the default. And then for here, you'll want to set the password as root, as mentioned here in the text setup guide. However, if you plan to make this server accessible outside of your local network, I would suggest changing this to a more secure password. However, make sure you write that down somewhere and don't forget it. However, making the server accessible outside of your local network is not covered in this video or text guide. We just click next, keep the defaults, install. That. And then lastly, the SQLite browser. Only reason why we need this is for running the migrations that are a part of the server setup process, as well as updating if you update the server later on. So go down and select the latest version for Windows. We can just create a desktop icon if you want, and then just keep the rest of the default settings. Alrighty, so that is all of the software downloaded. So now we can move on to cloning the GitHub repository. So I'm going to close that window and open up a file browser. So I have one already opened, it's in my downloads page. And you want to head to your documents. So in your documents, you'll want to right-click. And this is on Windows 11. You'll need to show more options. If you're on Windows 10, you can skip the show more options. But you want to go down and select Git Bash here. All right. And then we want to copy what is in the text guide and then paste it in there, and then hit enter. And then it should start cloning the repository. Alright. Now that is done, you should now have a folder called Darkflame Server in your documents folder. So now we can close this terminal. Then we can start building the server source. So we want to move into the Darkflame server folder. You want to right-click in the folder and say Open in Terminal. If you're on Windows 10, you'll need to hold Shift and open with PowerShell. So we'll open the terminal. In the terminal, we will want to run /build.sh and then hit enter. And that should cause another window to pop up. And then it will start compiling the server source. This will take some time, so I will pause the video here and come back when it is done. Alrighty, the server source has finished compiling, and if things were done correctly, you should be able to close this window. And if you go to the Darkflame folder, you should see that there is now a folder called build. And you go into there, you see a bunch of stuff in here, as well as another folder called release. We go into there, you should see basically what's on my screen here. You have auth server, chat server, master server, and world server. While we are here, we go to we want to make it so we can see file extensions. So we want to go to View, Show, and then File Name Extensions. So that way we can see that's an exe and text file and stuff like that. All right, so that is done. Now we can prepare the client files. So we want to go back to Documents, and then we want to copy over wherever we downloaded the, or wherever you have the client RAR file, which in my case it's in my Downloads folder. We want to copy that. Copy that. There we go. And paste it in the Documents folder. Right, so now that is moved over, then we can right click it, show more options, go to ZZip, and then extract files. Keep all the defaults, those are fine, and click OK. This will also take some time, so I'll pause the video here and come back when it is done. Alrighty, so the client should now be done unzipping, so now you should have a folder called LegUniverse Unpacked, or whatever your .rar file is called. So if you go inside, you can see it should look exactly like this with the files that are inside. So if you go back, and you can also now delete the .rar file, the .rar file, as we don't need that anymore. So delete that. One thing I did realize is I skipped a step in the previous building the server step. So if we go back into the Darkflame server folder, and go into build. If there aren't any exe files in this folder, or more specifically, if there isn't a master server, world server, auth server, and chat server.exe in this folder, we will need to drag them out of the release folder. So we'll go into the release folder, and we can see that we have them in here. However, to see the .exe part, we want to go to View, Show, File Name Extensions. Now we can see that it's a .exe, and later on you can help see that, like what's a text file and stuff like that. All right, so we want to select all of these. So the auth server, chat server, master server, and world server. And to get these selected all at once, I'm holding down left control and clicking on the ones that I want. So those are all selected. Now we can copy, go back to the build folder, and we can paste them into the build folder. All right, so now that that is done, we have extracted the client. Now we can start setting up the server resource directory. So to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to open up a second Windows File Explorer window. There we go. And you can drag them such and rearrange it so that they are side by side. We want to navigate to Documents, and then on the right one, on the right File Explorer window, we'll go into the client, and then on the left one, we will go into the server. So we will need to move over from the server, or sorry, from the client. So we go into the client's res folder. And if we look in the text guide, we will need to move over the macros folder, brick models folder, the chat plus text file, the names folder, and the maps folder, and move those into the build res folder of the server. So on the server, on the left, we'll go into the build folder and go into the res folder. If the res folder does not exist, you can right click and create a new folder called res. All right, so we'll go into the res folder, and then on the client, on the right side here, we want to select the folders and files listed in the text guide. So We'll start from the left. We'll go for macros. So we'll hold down Control and select macros, and then also brick models, and then chat plus, right here, chat plus, and then names and maps. All right, and then we want to copy all that and paste it into the res folder. All right, now that is done, we'll go back to the build folder and go back, also one back more to the main folder of the server. And we want to find the resources folder. And in that resources folder, you'll see a nav meshes zip. So we want to copy that, copy, and then go and paste that into build res maps. Right, and then we can right click and extract. Right, close that out. So now you see we have the unzipped nav meshes folder. So now that that is unzipped, we can delete the zip folder because we don't need that anymore. So we can, oops, delete that. All right, now we can set up the locale folder. So we go back to the build directory of the server, find the locale folder. Again, if this isn't here, you can create a folder called a locale. So we'll go into there, and then on the client, we want to go back to the main folder and go into the locale folder of the client and copy the XML file. So we'll copy, paste that into the server build locale folder. Alrighty, now that that is done, we can close out the client file window, and we can just go back to the main folder here, and we can minimize that. So now we need to start setting up the client database. So actually go back, open up the File Explorer window, and go into the, go back to Documents, open up the client, and go into Res, and you will see the CD client .fdb. So we will need to convert this into an SQLite folder, or folder file, which is something the server can use. To do that, we'll use the website that is linked in the text guide. So we'll go to that website and make sure the FDB to SQLite option is checked, and then click the file. And we'll want to navigate to where we have our clients. So that'll be Documents, our client, and then Res, and scroll down and select the CD client. Open. Right, when that is done, we'll now check. It should download it to your document or your downloads folder. So if we open up downloads, we'll see that there is a CD client.sqlite folder. So we'll copy this, and then we will paste it into our res folder of our server. So we'll go back to Documents, go into the server, and then go into Build, and then Res, then paste that here. And then you'll see mentioned in the guide, we will need to rename the file to cdserver.sqlite with a capital C, D, and S. So we'll just go over and rename. All right. So now that that is done, we can now check to see if we have everything moved over as it should be. So we'll see that in the build folder of the server, so we'll go back to the build folder, we should have the auth server exe, chat server exe, master server.exe, and world server.exe. So you have the chat server, auth server, master server, and world server. Then we want to make sure we have the auth config, chat config, master config, and world config. So we have the auth config, chat config, and the master config, and the world config. And then we want to make sure that we have our locale folder, and it has the locale.xml. And then we have our res folder, which is down here, and that we have the cd server.sql out file, and we have the chat plus text file, and the macros, brick models, maps, and names folders, which are right here. And then we make sure that inside the maps folder, we have the nav meshes folder. All right, so now we can not close out, but we can minimize this window. As now we're going to set up the server SQL database. So to begin with that, we want to go to the start menu and search MariaDB, and you want to find the command prompt MariaDB. And you want to click on that. Should now open up command prompt, and then we'll want to type in what is listed in the text guide. So that will be mysql-u root-p. Yep, and then we hit enter. And then the password will be whatever you set it to. So if you didn't change it, it should be root, as it was mentioned at the beginning of this video. However, if you changed it to something else, that would be the password you enter. So in my case, since I used root, we'll just type in root, hit enter, and now you should be into the root user for the database. Right, next we want to copy this line here from the guide, paste that into the terminal. You can paste it into terminal by just right-clicking into the terminal. Then once that is pasted, we want to go over and use the arrow keys, the left and right arrow keys, to come over here and delete password, and we'll want to put in a password. I would suggest using custom password, something that you can remember, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to make the password test. So just keep it simple just for the tutorial. But I would highly suggest changing the password to something that is a lot more unique than test, and that you can also remember as well. So once that is done, we could hit enter, and that should pop up, which is good. And then we want to run this command, which will create the database. Darkflame is the name of the database. So if you want to change that, you can change it, but keep it Darkflame just for the purposes of this tutorial. So once that's done, we can hit enter, and that's all good. Then we want to grant all privileges to the Darkflame user. Go. We want to run this command. Paste that, run that. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier is the when we ran this command here, we were creating a database user whose username is Darkflame and whose password was the password that you entered. So when we go and use those credentials later on for the config files of the server, you'll be needing the Darkflame username or the database username and the database password. You will also need the database name, which in this case is also Darkflame. So that is the stuff for the server. So now that you've run all those commands, we can now exit out of here. So we just click or type exit followed by a semicolon, and that's done. And now we can close the terminal window. So now we can start setting up the .ini files, which are the config files for the server. So we go back to our File Explorer window and go to the build folder of the server. And you should see that we have the auth server.ini files. So in the following folder files, so the auth config, chat config, master config, and world config, we will want to do the following. So let's open up start with the auth config. double click that, and it should open in a notepad. All right, so we should now type in, just as it is in the text guide. So for these MySQL host, we want to type in localhost. And then for the database, Darkflame. And then the MySQL username, that'll be also Darkflame. And then for the password is what we have, or what you chose for the database password. So in this case, or in my case, I used test as the password, so just put in test. If you change the password to something else, it will be something else, just to let you know. All right. Next, we want to make sure that the external IP is also set to localhost. And then we can save the file. So file save. And then to make things a little bit easier, we will copy this whole block like that. And then we can close this file. And we can move on to the chat config. So find the chat config, open up that, select all that, and then paste. There you go. And then make sure that the external IP is set to localhost. We'll save that file. And then we'll move on to the master config. Same process. For this one, make sure it's localhost. Save it. Close it. And then the world config. Great. And then select the copy, or select the block of code, paste it, and save it. For the world config, you don't need to set the external IP since that is not an option here. All right, that is pasted, and now we can close it and saved before you close it. All right, so that is done. We have now configured the .ini files. Now we can start setting up start running the database migrations. So we want to go to the build folder of the server. We are already here. And in the build folder, we want to right click and open up a terminal. Right. Now, once we are in the terminal, we want to run the following command. Running this command will run the database migrations, or the MySQL database migrations. So once that's enter, we'll hit enter. And you should see a message just like this saying that it's ran all these migrations. Now we can close the terminal. Now we can run the migrations for the SQLite folder, or a file. So we need to open up the DB browser. So the DB browser that we installed earlier, the SQLite browser, we need to open up that program. So I had it installed as an icon to your desktop, so you can just, if you did that as well, you can open it there, or you can try searching for it. But once you have opened it, you want to click on the Open Database, and then you want to navigate to where we have the CD server SQLite file in the server. So we go to Documents, the server, and then Build, and then Res, and then click on the CD server file. Click Open, and now you should see, open this a bit, now you should see a whole bunch of things populate the left window. All right, then we want to switch to the Execute SQL tab, and then click the Open SQL Files. Now we want to navigate to the Darkflame server folder, and then navigate to Migrations, and then CD server. And then we want to select all of these, so you just drag and select all. And depending on when you are doing this tutorial, there could be more than just 4 or more than 5 files here. So you want to make sure you select all the files that are in this folder. Once you have done that, you can click open. And now you should see the tab populate here with a whole bunch of the files that you have opened. So now we want to click this arrow and just go to the far left. And so we have 0 here. And then you want to click on that tab. And then you want to click the run. There we go. And then you should see something pop up, something about executing. All right, and then we want to do that for every single one of the files that was opened in this tab. So we can switch to the next tab, making sure that we start with the one with the lowest number. So in this case, 0. And then we can move on to the one with number 1, switch that tab, click run, go to the next tab, click run, let that finish. There we go. And then click on this one, click run, and then move the window over, and then click on this tab and also click run. All right, now that that is done, now we can click on the write changes button up above, write the changes, and now we can close this. So now the both databases have been updated. One thing to note is in the future, when updating your database or updating the server, to run SQLite migrations, you'll need to follow the same process again, but only selecting the new migration files. All right, so now that that is done, we will set up an admin account for the server. So go back to the build folder of the server, and then we want to open up a terminal. And then we want to run the following command. And this will set up a admin user for the server. So we'll click enter. So now it wants us to enter a username. So this username is what you will use to log into the game. So when you open up the game client and you're logging in, this will be the username you will use. So I'll just keep things basic. I'll call it test. And then you want to enter a password. I'm also going to call it test. Obviously, you'll want to make something more secure than that. But I'm just going to use test. All right. If you hit enter, it should say that it was created successfully. And you should see a similar message to this. One thing to note is remember the username and password you have chosen. There is no easy way to reset your database or just reset the password without the Nexus dashboard, but this guide does not go into that. So yeah, make sure you write those down and remember them. All right, with that done, we will move on to the client configuration. All right, so to do the client configuration step, we will need to go back to our documents folder and open up the client. And we will want to open up the boot.cfg file. So when you find that file, which is this file right here, so we click on it, and then right click, and then open with, and then notepad. And it should open up this window here. And we want to find the auth server IP line, so this line right here, and make sure that it is set to localhost, which it is here, so we're all set, and you can close the file. If it's not set to localhost automatically, set it to localhost, save the file, and then close it. All right, so now we need to fix a script in the client. There is a bug in one of the lines, and we need to fix it. So to do that, we will need to navigate to the res folder, and then the scripts folder, and then the AI folder, minigame folder, and then survival folder. And then we want to open up the this file right here. In order to do that though, we'll need to change it so that we can modify it. So we want to left click on it and then right click and then open up the properties. And then we want to uncheck the read only. Hit apply and then OK. Now that we've done that, then we can open it up. So we want to right click again, or left click, and then right click, and then open with, and then open with Notepad. All right. And so according to the document or the text guide, we need to go to line 617. So to do that, go to the Notepad and then hit Control G and type in 617 for 617 and then go to. And you'll see down here the cursors flashing on the line that we need to change. And it looks like we need to change it from ready player self to on ready player self. So we just go over here and type on, and then make sure that the matches what we have in the document here. So on player ready self, so we're all set. So we want to save the file and then close it. And we are all good to go. So now we can start running the server. So to do that, you want to go to the server, back to documents, server. We want to go to the build folder, and then we want to open up a terminal. All right. And then to run the server, we want to run this command here. So we want to copy that and paste it here, and then hit enter. Now you'll get, if you get these firewall messages, you can just cancel them all out. If you're going to make the server go outside your network, then you might want to change it. But since we're not wanting our server to go outside the network, we can go ahead and cancel all these. All right, so now you should have a bunch of terminal windows that are open, and we want to find the. There you go. So the main terminal that you open. This is your main terminal, and this is the master server. So it looks like everything is all ready to go. We got one more here. There you go. So now we should be ready to open up the client and log in. So let's go back to our folder here. Go to Documents, go to our client, and now we can start up the game here. Of course, we got to read all that. So ignore the graphical images. So we can type in test. All right, so now we're in. We can create a character, log in, all that stuff, play around. But for the sake of this tutorial, we got what we need to do. So we can close this, back out, and we can. All right, so now that's all set. Now you're all good to go in terms of you got a server that runs. You can start it. To stop the server, you'll want to go to back to the main terminal window, click on it, and hit Control+C, so Control C, and wait a couple seconds, and all the terminal windows should disappear. And then you're left with the main terminal window. Once that is done, you can close it out, and server has been stopped. So, as of the writing of this guide and the filming of this tutorial, the DLU codebase is still actively being developed, and bug fixes are being applied, optimizations, and sometimes features as well. So it is recommended to update your server at least every 2 weeks. So in order to do that, you would need to go to the server. So go back to Documents, go to the server, and then you'll want to open up a terminal. There you go. And you'll want to run, since the server is already up to date, I won't be running the commands, but what you'll want to do is you'll want to run this command here, which will pull all the new code changes from the Darkflame repository. You'll then want to run the build script, which will build or recompile all the new code changes. You'll also want, once the code has been compiled, you'll want to move over the newly compiled executables from the release folder and put them into the build folder. And you will be prompted to overwrite the existing exe files and you want to overwrite them. So when you get prompted with that, click OK and overwrite the files. In addition to updating the code, sometimes there is updates to the database, whether that be the SQL database or the SQLite database. And those come in the form of migrations. The SQL migrations are run automatically when you run the build script. So running the build script will automatically run the SQL migrations. So you don't have to worry about those. The SQLite migrations will have to be run manually. So as I mentioned before, you'll need to go and run the SQLite migrations as mentioned further up in the document. To see if there are new migrations, you can either pay attention to the Lig Universe Community Hub Discord channel, which I'll have a link to that in the description of this video. Or you can, after you've pulled the new code, you can go to the migrations file or migrations folder in the server. So right here. And the DLU folder will contain MySQL migrations, but since the build folder or the build script takes care of those for you, you don't have to worry about that. However, the CD server folder, which contains the SQLite migrations. So as you can see, they're numbered. So you can just keep a record of which ones you've run. So you can see that it goes up to 4 here. So if you check it after a git pull and you notice that there's a file called 5 and then some name, you'll know that there's a new file. So then you want to run that new file. But yeah, other than that, everything should be all set to go. If you want to create additional users for your database or for your server, you'll want what's called the Nexus dashboard. So if we go to the original repo or the Darkflame repo, scroll up here, go to the main hub, repositories, and then Nexus dashboard. And this will allow you to create new accounts. It will allow you to approve names for your characters and all that. You don't need to do that for the user that you created earlier in this tutorial. That user has admin privileges, so by default, all names are auto-approved. So you don't have to worry about that. But setting up Nexus dashboard is a whole other thing and isn't covered in this tutorial. But yeah, have fun with the server, and if you have any questions, be sure to ask in the main Lig Universe Discord.